suspended precisely 1 million miles away from the comforting warmth of our home planet. At the second Lagrange point, the James Webb Space Telescope purposefully aligned its gleaming gold-plated beryllium mirrors toward a chilling expanse of the deep cosmic void that conventional astrophysics had long mathematically guaranteed to be utterly barren and completely devoid of any significant structural features. Operating at an incredibly punishing -266 degrees Celsius, the highly sensitive mid-infrared instrument, known as MIRI, bypassed the blinding glare of foreground stars to capture a sprawling, perfectly symmetrical geometric thermal anomaly stretching across billions of light years that completely defied every established astrophysical model published in leading journals like Nature and Science. Instead of the universally anticipated random distribution of chaotic galaxy clusters expanding amorphously into the infinite dark, the heavily encrypted telemetry data beamed back to the terrified operators at the command center revealed a highly organized, artificial-looking mega-ring structure maintaining an impossibly stable thermodynamic temperature of exactly 7 Kelvin across its entire unfathomable circumference. This flawlessly continuous and geometrically unnatural cosmic band aggressively violates the most sacred cosmological principle that has governed astrophysics for over a century, a foundational law aggressively demanding that the universe must be uniformly homogeneous and isotropic on a massive scale, rather than being rigidly constrained by an organized, seemingly engineered physical boundary of this utterly terrifying magnitude. Rapidly cross-referencing this mathematical nightmare with the advanced near-infrared camera system, exposed an even more disturbing localized reality, unequivocally demonstrating that the intense gravitational lensing effects surrounding this megalithic structure were bending primordial background light in a rigid, non-fluid manner that sharply contradicts Einsteinian relativity and the accepted principles of spacetime elasticity. Visualizing this catastrophic phenomenon strictly through the raw, unfiltered spectrographic data makes our observable universe look far less like an infinitely expanding ocean of limitless possibilities, and much more like a meticulously monitored, heavily guarded microscopic petri dish surrounded by a towering, impenetrable synthetic cell wall purposefully designed to keep something genuinely horrifying safely locked inside. Spanning a truly mind-breaking geometric diameter of roughly 4,000 megaparsecs, this impossibly continuous loop of hyperdense exotic matter and trapped ancient photons is silently mocking the combined computing power of humanity's greatest supercomputers, systems which continuously crash when attempting to process the sheer volume of zero-point energy required to maintain such a structurally perfect artificial shape. Desperate secondary verification diagnostic runs, utilizing the incredibly precise NIRSpec array, only forcefully cemented this mounting apocalyptic dread, completely confirming an anomalous 99.7% signal anomaly rate emanating directly from the megaring's core, proving beyond any shadow of a statistical doubt that this is not a random sensor glitch, but a highly physical manifestation of impossible physics. The brilliant hardware engineers, frantically monitoring the complex cryocooler telemetry, watched in absolute, paralyzed silence as they profoundly realized that the rigid temperature boundaries of this colossal cosmic cage were not naturally dissipating into the void, but were instead aggressively leaching ambient thermal energy from neighboring star systems to artificially sustain its own unfathomably immense structural integrity. As the terrifyingly pristine, unedited deep space telescope imagery continues to relentlessly render on the highly classified monitors of visibly shaken astrophysicists, the most horrifying technical question is no longer how this impossible macro-architecture manages to physically exist, but rather what unspeakably ancient, primordial cosmic predator could possibly be roaming the void that required the construction of such a massive barricade. Spanning across billions of light years like an ancient, malignant cosmic predator, the gargantuan gravitational footprint of this impossible ring structure is actively tearing apart surrounding galaxy superclusters, violently twisting the delicate fabric of space-time into an unrecognizable, grotesque spiral of pure destruction that threatens to erase every celestial body caught within its rapidly growing horizon of absolute devastation. Astrophysicists simulating the monstrous structural dynamics of this cosmic ring on supercomputers watched with unadulterated horror as the extreme tidal forces stripped tens of thousands of spiral galaxies of their starlight, liquefying planetary systems into searing ribbons of plasma before devouring them into an endlessly hungry primordial void that defies every physical law known to human science. As entire galactic neighborhoods are violently drawn toward the interior edge of the megaring, hyper-energetic relativistic jets blast outward across millions of light years, thoroughly scorching delicate interstellar gas clouds and permanently converting ancient stellar nurseries into desolate, radiation-poisoned atomic graveyards where no future generation of stars or living worlds will ever have the chance to be born. The apocalyptic shear stress generated along the gigantic perimeter of this cosmic anomaly creates localized space-time fractures, triggering catastrophic vacuum decay bubbles that propagate outward at the exact speed of light, instantly overwriting the fundamental physical constants of everything they touch and reducing highly complex matter into a featureless, chaotic subatomic slurry that can never reform. Advanced supercomputer simulations modeling the terrifying trajectory of our own local group indicate that the megaring's expanding gravitational wake is already pulling the Virgo supercluster toward a gargantuan dark energy rupture, a cosmic sinkhole that will eventually drag our entire galaxy into an inescapable, infinitely crushing abyss from which not even quantum light can ever hope to escape. The horrifying velocity at which this cosmic titan is consuming surrounding matter generates blinding flashes of ultra-high energy gamma-ray bursts that instantly sterilize entire star systems in fractions of a microsecond, violently stripping away protective planetary atmospheres and leaving behind billions of scorched, irradiated, and completely silent worlds drifting helplessly through perpetual darkness. Observing this localized apocalyptic cataclysm forces astrophysicists to recognize that dark matter is not merely an invisible gravitational scaffold holding galaxies together, but rather a terrifying hyperdense kinetic force engineered to systematically crush stellar structures into hypermassive black holes that continuously feed energy into the megaring's unstoppable, highly predatory expansion. The horrific magnitude of this unprecedented cosmic gravitational disruption is now visibly distorting ancient primordial light from the very beginning of time, casting a terrifying, perfectly elongated geometric shadow across the entire cosmic microwave background that looks chillingly like a colossal unnatural surgeon's incision carved directly into the sacred fabric of our observable universe. Every new high-resolution observational scan reconfirms that this monstrous megastructure is not expanding passively like a normal astronomical formation, but is actively and systematically devouring the fabric of space itself, rapidly collapsing the physical metric between isolated galaxy clusters as it pulls our entire local cosmos toward a crushing, inescapable singularity of total physical oblivion. As terrified scientists stand on the precipice of witnessing the inevitable collapse of our cosmic sanctuary, we are left staring frozen into the abyss of a horrifying realization. What if this colossal ring is not destroying our universe by random cosmological accident, but is systematically digesting the fabric of our reality to feed whatever unspeakably massive entity is waiting on the other side of the void? As the undeniable mathematical reality of this impossible cosmic megaring solidifies across the global scientific community, a profound existential dread settles over researchers who realize that humanity's cherished place in an infinite universe is nothing more than a delusional fantasy engineered to mask our total physical captivity, forcing us to confront the terrifying possibility that the cosmos was never built for our discovery, but rather for our strict containment. This catastrophic cosmological discovery offers a chilling solution to the famous Fermi Paradox, suggesting that the reason we have never detected intelligent alien civilizations is not because they are rare or distant, but because every evolving species that attempts to reach beyond its stellar cradle eventually collides with this impenetrable physical threshold and is systematically extinguished before achieving cosmic maturity. Contemplating the sheer, terrifying geometry of this artificial ring instantly strips away every remaining layer of human hubris, reducing all of our grandest historical achievements, scientific triumphs, and deeply held philosophical doctrines to meaningless subatomic dust trapped inside a vast galactic quarantine zone engineered by an ancient entity that remains completely, terrifyingly indifferent to our species' fragile existence. The crushing psychological weight of this revolutionary astronomical realization manifests as a profound global existential crisis, where leading cosmologists and philosophers actively question whether humanity's scientific progress is merely an elaborate, cruel illusion designed to keep caged minds occupied while calculating the precise, inevitable parameters of their own irreversible extinction within this suffocating cosmic cage. Instead of gazing up at the shimmering night sky with inspiring awe and romantic curiosity, future generations will now peer into the deep cosmic void with pure, unadulterated horror, knowing that every burning star they behold is nothing more than a doomed candle flickering helplessly inside a vast, freezing abattoir whose artificial boundaries are steadily and relentlessly contracting around our ridiculously fragile solar system. This horrifying macro structure utterly demolishes humanity's long-cherished dream of eventual interstellar expansion, revealing with cold mathematical certainty that any desperate attempt by our species to venture beyond our immediate galactic neighborhood will inevitably result in a catastrophic collision with an impenetrable, hyperdense barrier of ancient, fundamentally hostile space-time that allows absolutely nothing to cross its threshold. The suffocating sense of cosmic loneliness that now accompanies this discovery is unlike anything human civilization has ever experienced, forcing us to realize that we are not merely isolated observers floating in a vast sky, but deliberate prisoners trapped inside a dark, synthetic terrarium designed specifically to prevent our world from ever communicating with or even comprehending the terrifying reality operating outside our cosmic walls. By defining the absolute physical edge of our observable reality, this giant synthetic ring demonstrates with chilling finality that all human concepts of historical legacy, progress, and spiritual transcendence are merely fragile coping mechanisms constructed by an ignorant species clinging frantically to the comforting illusion of purpose while drifting aimlessly inside a cold, engineered containment machine that operates without mercy. As prominent theologians, astrophysicists, and philosophers frantically struggle to find meaning inside this artificial cosmic cage, a terrifying consensus slowly crystallizes among researchers that our universe was never intended to be comprehended by frail biological minds, and that discovering this forbidden geometric reality may serve as the ultimate cosmic trigger that automatically initiates our enclosure's final disposal process. And as the horrifying psychological weight of our cosmic confinement permanently settles into the collective human consciousness, an even more terrifying philosophical question begins to haunt the visibly shaken researchers analyzing the telescope data. What if this colossal megastructure was not built to prevent us from escaping our observable universe, but was constructed as a final desperate shield to keep something infinitely worse outside? Carefully analyzing the dusty historical archives of early 20th century astrophysics reveals a deeply unsettling truth about our fundamental understanding of the cosmos, forcefully highlighting how brilliant pioneers like Edwin Hubble constructed their entire isotropic framework on severely limited observational data that completely failed to detect this colossal, terrifying megaring hiding in the dark. When the legendary Albert Einstein initially introduced his famous cosmological constant back in the year 1917 to mathematically force a static universe, he unknowingly brushed against the terrifying gravitational shadow of this ancient synthetic boundary before quickly discarding the complex equation as his greatest professional blunder and tragically sealing our scientific ignorance for a century. For well over 100 consecutive years, the world's most prestigious academic institutions aggressively championed the sacred cosmological principle, vigorously demanding that celestial matter must be distributed evenly across a vast and randomly expanding void in order to deliberately maintain a comforting psychological illusion of a boundless universe that is fundamentally natural, safe, and completely unbound. Humanity now realizes with absolute paralyzing horror that those foundational textbooks, published in elite scientific journals like Nature, were fundamentally incorrect, essentially mapping the heavily localized physics of a microscopic containment zone while remaining completely blind to the rigid geometric bars of the immense macro-scale cage that silently and maliciously surrounds our entire galactic neighborhood. Primitive optical telescopes, constructed throughout the mid-20th century, simply lacked the advanced deep infrared sensitivity required to penetrate the thick primordial dust heavily obscuring this cosmic structure, effectively trapping generations of brilliant astronomers in a tragically misguided paradigm where they foolishly mistook the empty spaces between our local galaxies for genuine, limitless infinity. Looking back at the triumphant historical television broadcasts of the legendary Apollo era reveals a deeply unsettling irony as humanity proudly celebrated taking its very first tiny steps onto a dead, irradiated moon while remaining completely unaware that our entire solar system is just a meaningless speck of cosmic dust, permanently trapped inside a gargantuan, artificially engineered astrophysical slaughterhouse. Even the highly classified, incredibly complex astrophysics models secretly developed by global military superpowers during the terrifying height of the Cold War completely failed to account for this massive anomaly, decisively proving that our greatest terrestrial conflicts were merely pathetic squabbles taking place on a sinking life raft, floating aimlessly inside an infinitely hostile, predator-filled cosmic ocean. The accepted historical timeline of the entire universe must now be aggressively rewritten from scratch to accommodate a terrifying new epoch preceding the Big Bang, a pitch-dark primordial period when unknown ancient architects forged this impossibly dense megaring to forcibly contain the explosive birth of our reality and intentionally manipulate the subsequent evolutionary trajectory of all biological life forms. As terrified modern researchers desperately review decades of archived spectroscopic data through this horrifying new lens, they can clearly see the subtle, previously overlooked warning signs of this cosmic prison hidden entirely in plain sight, decisively proving that humanity has spent the last century blindly worshipping a comforting scientific mythology that was always destined to be violently and abruptly shattered. If our most foundational historical theories regarding relativity, gravity, and the infinite expansion of the universe have been completely fabricated by the existence of this artificial boundary, then what truly horrifying cosmic secrets are currently being hidden within the impossible quantum chemistry and severely warped thermodynamic laws operating deep inside the megaring's impenetrable, violently glowing hyperdense core. Utilizing the breathtaking hypersensitivity of the James Webb Space Telescope's near-infrared camera, terrified astrophysicists finally pierced the impossibly dense veil of ancient cosmic dust to directly analyze the unprecedented spectroscopic signature radiating from the terrifying megaring structure, expecting to find normal primordial hydrogen, but instead discovering something that permanently breaks physics. The incredibly complex telemetry data beamed back to Earth revealed an absolutely staggering concentration of hyper-heavy synthetic isotopes that violently contradicts every established mathematical formula within the standard model of particle physics, definitively proving that this dark matter ring is not a natural formation but a manufactured lattice operating under entirely foreign laws of thermodynamics. Examining the horrifying high-resolution spectroscopic breakdown generated by the NIR-SPEC instrument, exposed highly unnatural absorption lines indicating the presence of elements far heavier than oganesson, impossible materials that should instantly decay into radioactive chaos, but are instead mathematically locked into a perfectly stable crystalline matrix, spanning billions of light-years across the frozen void. This highly artificial atomic architecture forcibly binds the colossal megastructure together by aggressively manipulating localized quantum fields, deliberately lowering the ambient vacuum energy state to literally freeze the surrounding fabric of space-time and aggressively halt the natural entropy that usually governs the thermodynamic evolution of expanding galaxy superclusters throughout our entire universe. Traditional equations of gravity established by generations of brilliant scientists are completely useless here, as the megaring exerts a horrifyingly asymmetric gravitational pull that selectively targets specific frequencies of baryonic matter, while allowing massive bursts of exotic dark energy to flow through its rigid geometric perimeter, completely undetected by our most advanced orbital sensor satellites. Pushing the telescope's delicate beryllium mirrors and complex cryocooler systems past their absolute theoretical limits. Engineers documented a continuous stream of 99.7% signal anomaly rates, indicating that the megaring is actively broadcasting a synchronized quantum resonance frequency designed to suppress the natural nuclear fusion occurring inside billions of neighboring stars. The sheer mathematical impossibility of this perfectly stable atomic configuration mathematically guarantees that the fundamental physics governing our fragile solar system are actually highly localized anomalies, basically proving that humanity has only ever studied the heavily suppressed atmospheric conditions existing entirely inside a carefully controlled and meticulously heavily quarantined cosmic environment. Mapping this terrifying spectroscopic data onto three-dimensional astrophysical models transforms the supposedly empty cosmic void into a horrifyingly intricate macro-scale machine, where entire galactic filaments are being systematically harvested and processed into pure subatomic fuel to endlessly power the hyperdense synthetic gravitational generators, maintaining this impossible cosmic boundary without end. It requires a truly mind-breaking volume of continuous energy to artificially stabilize these forbidden heavy elements against the crushing pressure of the cosmos, suggesting that the ring possesses a terrifying self-replicating internal mechanism capable of endlessly consuming and converting ordinary celestial matter just to maintain the flawless structural integrity of its impossibly rigid geometric shape. As our most brilliant hardware engineers desperately attempt to recalibrate the overwhelmed sensors to fully comprehend the terrifying scope of this engineered physics-breaking barricade, a deeply chilling question arises regarding the true purpose of this machine. What if these highly synthetic laws of thermodynamics were not designed to keep our expanding universe trapped, but rather to keep us safely asleep? The deeply chilling mathematical realization that our meticulously formulated physical equations are merely heavily localized anomalies operating completely within a strictly quarantined sector of space permanently shatters every single comforting philosophical framework humanity has ever dared to intelligently construct throughout our tragically brief and utterly insignificant biological existence here. When cosmologists gaze deeply into the terrifying perimeter of this immense macrostructure, they are instantly gripped by a suffocating sense of cosmic loneliness that reduces our proudest intellectual achievements to the meaningless scribblings of captive lab rats, trapped within an inconceivably massive experiment, completely devoid of any divine purpose or intrinsic cosmic significance whatsoever. For thousands of years, brilliant philosophers enthusiastically debated the profound meaning of our place among the stars, fundamentally assuming that the boundless cosmos was an open frontier, eagerly waiting to be peacefully explored by an enlightened and technologically advanced human civilization, continuously expanding its glorious reach into an infinitely welcoming and majestic celestial tapestry. This towering, unyielding geometric barricade forcibly strips away that beautiful and arrogant delusion, revealing with cold absolute certainty that we are completely isolated from the true cosmic reality by an impenetrable wall deliberately constructed to aggressively ensure we remain completely ignorant of the overwhelmingly horrifying truths constantly unfolding just beyond our limited local vision. Prominent existential thinkers now actively theorize that this monumental megaring represents the ultimate and inescapable great filter, a deeply terrifying physical boundary explicitly designed to securely contain highly ambitious evolutionary experiments like humanity and systematically prevent any aggressive biological species from ever successfully escaping their designated localized cosmic terrarium. The profound psychological trauma inflicted by this unprecedented astronomical discovery is rapidly cascading across global academic institutions, forcing deeply terrified scholars to frantically question if every conscious thought and emotional experience we possess is just a pre-programmed variable running pointlessly inside a heavily shielded and entirely meaningless cosmic isolation chamber of doom. We must now violently confront the incredibly depressing notion that the comforting standard model of the universe we lovingly teach in our prestigious universities is nothing more than the highly localized and heavily manipulated atmospheric physics of a deeply constrained synthetic cell designed to keep us incredibly small, totally blind, and completely passive against a much greater cosmic authority. By perfectly isolating our fragile solar neighborhood from the incredibly violent and chaotic energies surging across the greater unseen cosmos, the mysterious builders of this colossal structure have effectively trapped us in an eternal and completely silent graveyard where no actual meaningful interaction with higher dimensional realities or advanced extraterrestrial intelligence will ever be permitted. Looking up at the shimmering night sky no longer inspires a comforting sense of endless spiritual wonder, but instead violently triggers a deeply primal and suffocating claustrophobia as we finally recognize that the beautiful canopy of glittering stars is actually a meticulously engineered holographic projection, aggressively masking the cold, thick, unyielding iron bars of our eternal cosmic penitentiary. As humanity collectively cowers under the crushing psychological weight of this unfathomably cruel and entirely indifferent existential quarantine, a severely terrifying and completely logical final question begins to relentlessly echo through the frantic minds of our most brilliant astronomical researchers. What incredibly horrifying cosmic punishment awaits any captive species that finally attempts to break out. Peering deeply into the dark primordial past of our vast cosmos, roughly 13.8 billion years ago, astonished astrophysicists discover that during the mysterious cosmic dark ages, prior to the ignition of the very first ancient stellar core, this colossal megastructure was already silently spanning across the empty void, as an impossibly complex, perfectly ordered, and fully realized physical architecture. Standard cosmological models, published in prestigious academic journals like Nature, have long insisted that the early universe expanded as an isotropic, highly chaotic soup of hot plasma. But this ancient ring decisively proves that a remarkably sophisticated macrostructural blueprint was actively dictating the spatial distribution of matter billions of years before first-generation galaxies could ever naturally aggregate. Analyzing this terrifying primordial timeline forces modern astronomers to violently abandon the conventional Big Bang narrative, as there was simply not enough cosmic time following the initial inflationary epoch for gravity alone to assemble trillions of stellar masses into a hyper-aligned geometric ring stretching across 4,000 megaparsecs of space without external intelligent intervention. This deeply shocking chronological conflict mathematically demands that either the true age of our observable universe is vastly older than the universally accepted 13.8 billion years, or this synthetic megastructure is an indestructible relic that somehow successfully survived an entire previous cycle of cosmic death and rebirth before the violent Big Bounce forged our current reality. Historical data from early cosmic microwave background surveys conducted by NASA and the European Space Agency previously flagged subtle, circular thermal variations in the infant universe, but overly cautious researchers routinely dismissed these non-random acoustic signals as meaningless instrumental noise rather than recognizing the ancient gravitational signature of a pre-existing cosmic cage. Re-evaluating those historic Planck satellite maps through our current horrifying lens clearly reveals that the primordial seeds of cosmic structure were never randomly sown by quantum fluctuations during inflation, but were instead forcefully guided into precise geometric tracks along the massive gravitational ridges of this ancient dark matter scaffolding long before the first light atoms ever formed. The deeply disturbing existence of such a colossal engineered structure during the universe's absolute infancy completely shatters the fundamental thermodynamic assumption that entropy always increases from simple order to complex chaos, proving instead that our entire cosmos originated from an extremely dense state of artificial, hyper-complex organization that has been slowly decaying ever since. Archival records from mid-century observational cosmology demonstrate how pioneer astronomers repeatedly buried alarming anomalous measurements that hinted at non-uniform macrogeometries, terrified that acknowledging an engineered universe would permanently destroy the prestigious scientific reputation of empirical astrophysics and trigger an immediate collapse of public confidence in modern academia. By systematically uncovering the ancient origins of this colossal physical boundary, cosmologists now realize with overwhelming dread that the historical timeline taught in every university classroom on Earth is a carefully constructed fairy tale designed to hide the unnatural nature of our cosmic imprisonment. Behind a comforting facade of spontaneous, natural evolution spanning over billions of years. If this monstrous structural ring was explicitly engineered and put into position before the cosmic dawn to deliberately bind the primordial birth of our expanding universe, what unspeakably ancient, terrifying entity possessed the staggering technological capacity to construct a physical cage capable of comfortably trapping and endlessly containing the unimaginable explosive force of the Big Bang itself? If the incredibly immense and absolutely unimaginable gravitational tension currently holding this terrifying dark matter ring together were to suddenly snap under its own cosmic weight, it would immediately trigger a genuinely catastrophic true vacuum decay event across the entirety of our observable universe, violently erasing billions of ancient spiral galaxies in a single cold, merciless heartbeat. Simulating this apocalyptic macrostructural hypercollapse on the world's most advanced quantum supercomputers visualizes a rapidly expanding, perfectly spherical bubble of pure, unfiltered destructive energy propagating outward in all directions at the exact speed of light, permanently overwriting the fundamental physical constants of everything it mercilessly touches along its unstoppable path. This genuinely horrific, localized, apocalyptic cataclysm would not just burn or violently shatter planets, but would literally dissolve the fundamental strong nuclear forces holding atomic nuclei together, instantaneously vaporizing entire living star systems and reducing highly complex biological matter into a completely featureless, chaotic subatomic slurry that can never ever be reassembled by nature. Watching the unparalleled horror of this simulated death wave on encrypted laboratory monitors forces terrified scientists to confront the agonizing reality that our supposedly stable cosmic habitat is actually a fragile soap bubble resting upon an incredibly sharp, ancient blade, just waiting to mercilessly pop our entire existence into the dark without even a fraction of a millisecond of advance warning. The undeniable mathematical probability of this terrifying megaring collapsing increases exponentially with every massive star it actively consumes, ultimately suggesting that this cosmic machine is steadily approaching a critical thermodynamic breaking point where the artificial forces maintaining its geometry will inevitably fail and unleash a biblical flood of raw radiation across the galactic wilderness. Incredibly advanced simulations projecting the physical aftermath of this catastrophic structural rupture show a profoundly silent, utterly sterile universe where absolutely nothing remains except a lingering background hum of chaotic quantum noise, permanently extinguishing all possibility of future consciousness, biological evolution, or any meaningful cosmic architecture forming again for absolute eternity. The overwhelmingly terrifying truth is that, because this monstrous wave of annihilation travels precisely at the cosmic speed limit of light itself, we would never even see it coming in our telescopes, meaning the entire Earth and everyone on it would simply cease to exist in the exact time it takes for a single human neuron to fire, completely unmaking humanity's entire legacy in a deeply silent flash. Even more deeply disturbing is the highly controversial astrophysical theory proposing that this catastrophic vacuum decay event might have already been violently triggered thousands of years ago on the distant far side of the massive megaring, basically meaning the apocalyptic wall of ultimate cosmic deletion is currently racing silently toward our highly vulnerable solar system right at this very moment. As terrified researchers stare blankly at glowing telemetry monitors displaying the immense gravitational strain actively warping this dark matter framework, they quickly realize that we are basically sitting on the cosmic equivalent of an unexploded atomic bomb with a faulty, degrading timer that could easily hit zero at any given second and systematically delete the very concept of space-time from existence. Faced with the totally paralyzing mathematical certainty of our inevitable physical erasure by this collapsing cosmic cage, the world's most brilliant minds are now desperately turning to the encrypted telescope data streams to uncover the terrifying origins of this machine, begging one final horrifying question. If this engineered ring was meant to contain something, what exactly breaks loose when it fails? By analyzing the massive avalanche of deep-field spectral redshift data ranging from Z equals 10.5 to 16.2, astrophysicists mapped the precise curvature of the cosmic bind, utilizing the near-infrared camera to reveal an impossibly sharp geometric edge that should be blurred by cosmic evolution. proving that this dark matter ring maintains its structural shape through engineered mechanics that defy ordinary matter. As spectrographic telemetry streamed into supercomputer arrays at the laboratory, researchers identified a deeply unsettling, highly uniform absorption signature running along the inner perimeter of the megaring, indicating that the structure is continuously filtering specific electromagnetic frequencies to suppress stellar nucleosynthesis across nearby galaxy clusters, essentially forcing surrounding star systems into premature thermodynamic stagnation. Pushing the telescope's onboard cryocooler system to its operational threshold to maintain a frigid -266 degrees Celsius, hardware engineers captured a 99.7% signal anomaly rate emanating directly from the megaring's core, a statistical impossibility that confirms the presence of an active, highly organized energy feed operating far beyond the background thermal noise of the deep cosmic void. The near-infrared spectrograph further deconstructed these anomalous thermal emissions, revealing that localized photon wavelengths within the ring's gravitational shadow are systematically shifted into a repeating quantum cadence that bears the distinct mathematical markers of an artificial containment pulse rather than any natural astrophysical process ever catalogued in the history of radio astronomy or high-energy physics. When processing these high-resolution datasets through peer-reviewed orbital mechanics software, systems repeatedly threw critical execution errors because the megaring's mass distribution violates classical tensor equations, demonstrating an effective gravitational mass that dynamically shifts depending on the observation angle, as if the colossal apparatus is actively adjusting its physical profile to absorb incoming cosmic rays and redirect exotic energy. Secondary data verification from space-based interferometers confirmed that the core signal contains zero thermal variance across its megaparsec span, a mind-boggling technical metric which proves that energy travels across the entire circumference of this megastructure instantaneously, bypassing the cosmic speed limit of light through an engineered quantum entanglement framework that holds the dark matter ring together without lagging. Hardware specialists monitoring the JWST's guidance sensors noted that the faint gravitational lensing produced by the ring creates a bizarre double image effect where background quasars appear mirrored across a synthetic focal plane, forming a massive cosmological lens that distorts light in a manner that completely obscures whatever lies directly behind the dark matter framework's central axis from human observation. By overlaying these spectroscopic readings with high-energy gamma-ray mapping from orbital observatories, scientists reconstructed a digital model of the anomaly, unmasking a complex network of hyper-dense energy conduits woven directly into the fabric of localized space-time, functioning like an unspeakably massive cooling radiator that constantly vents entropy out of our local universe and into an unknown external dimension. Deep space radar telemetry sent toward the anomaly returned an extraordinarily clean, non-scattered echo that suggests the inner lining of the ring possesses a mirror-like smoothness at the subatomic scale, an impossible material property that prevents surrounding gas from accumulating along its surface and guarantees that the colossal structure will remain pristine and frictionless throughout trillions of years of cosmic expansion. As the terrifyingly precise data analysis confirms that every instrument on the James Webb Space Telescope is operating at peak calibration, astrophysicists are left staring at a cold, flawless mathematical proof of artificial containment, forcing them to confront the most frightening diagnostic question of all. If this complex cosmic machine is constantly draining energy to keep its perimeter sealed, what colossal force is currently pounding against the outer walls? Back in the year 1933, the brilliant and highly controversial Swiss astrophysicist Fritz Zwicky carefully observed the distant coma cluster, and mathematically deduced that an invisible, unfathomably heavy missing mass was forcefully holding those rapidly spinning galaxies together against all the previously established and globally accepted laws of standard classical Newtonian physics. For nearly a century following his groundbreaking publication, mainstream cosmology incorrectly theorized this dark matter as a passive, fluid-like web gently cradling the cosmos, a comforting assumption widely taught in prestigious modern universities, to deliberately avoid confronting the terrifying possibility of an engineered structural framework actively manipulating our localized galactic neighborhood. Now, utilizing the unparalleled resolution of the James Webb Space Telescope's advanced optical sensors, we realize with paralyzing horror that Zwicky's invisible missing mass is not a natural cosmic fluid at all, but rather the immense gravitational shadow cast by this impossibly solid, hyperdense synthetic ring meticulously forged during the absolutely darkest epochs of the primordial universe. Digging deeply into the forgotten historical archives of 20th century astronomy reveals that multiple independent observatories quietly recorded bizarre geometric gravitational anomalies over the decades, but deeply terrified institutional gatekeepers systematically dismissed these chilling topological readings as mere instrumental artifacts to aggressively protect the fragile standard cosmological model. Decades of celebrated peer-reviewed papers triumphantly published in elite scientific journals like Nature and Science have now been violently rendered completely obsolete, as the indisputable existence of this colossal binding mechanism mathematically proves that our supposedly chaotic and naturally expanding universe has actually been rigidly constrained by artificial cosmic architecture all along. What generations of brilliant astronomers fundamentally misunderstood as a naturally occurring cosmic web binding distant galaxy clusters together was actually just the faintly glowing radioactive exhaust constantly venting from the incomprehensibly massive subatomic engines that have been continuously powering this dark matter cage since the violent, chaotic aftermath of the initial Big Bang singularity. When the legendary astronomer Vera Rubin famously discovered flat galactic rotation curves in the 1970s, she unknowingly documented the precise mechanical drag exerted by this colossal geometric structure as its unyielding gravitational anchors slowly dragged through the delicate interstellar medium, forcing entire galaxies to spin in highly unnatural and strictly synchronized cosmic rhythms. We must now accept the deeply horrifying historical reality that every single human astronomer who ever gazed lovingly into the shimmering night sky through a primitive optical telescope was completely blinded by a brilliantly engineered optical illusion, utterly failing to perceive the massive iron bars of the inescapable cosmic penitentiary that was silently enclosing our entire fragile solar system. The entire documented history of human astrophysics must be immediately rewritten from scratch to explicitly acknowledge that our proudest mathematical achievements were simply the naive calculations of captive biological organisms desperately trying to understand the incredibly complex thermodynamics of a localized quarantine zone without ever realizing they were locked securely inside an artificial box. As terrified historians desperately re-examine these previously ignored cosmological anomalies with our new horrifyingly clear perspective, they stumble upon a chilling hidden pattern buried deep within the ancient redshift data that abruptly begs an absolutely terrifying final question. What happens to the trapped contents of this cosmic cage when the architects finally return to initiate the harvest? To maintain the terrifying structural integrity of this gargantuan dark matter ring, its impossible geometric architecture mathematically demands the constant and aggressive consumption of ordinary celestial matter, violently dragging countless ancient star systems into its crushing perimeter just to endlessly fuel the unnatural gravitational engines explicitly designed to keep our localized cosmic cage intact. Advanced supercomputer simulations, modeling the violently distorted localized space-time dynamics right near the ring's inner boundary, reveal an absolutely horrifying feeding process, where extreme tidal shear forces massive supergiant stars into screaming ribbons of superheated plasma that are mercilessly devoured by the pitch-black, infinitely hungry void of the megaring's terrifying active core. This genuinely catastrophic macro-scale digestion cycle continuously generates localized hypernovas of completely unimaginable destructive power, producing blindingly bright explosions that instantly sterilize surrounding planetary systems with highly lethal doses of gamma radiation before their rapidly expanding shockwaves are abruptly and violently choked out by the heavy artificial vacuum of the engineered barrier. Witnessing the truly primal, visceral cosmic terror of ancient and majestic stellar nurseries being systematically ground down into completely featureless subatomic dust severely traumatizes the observing research astrophysicists, brutally hammering home the profoundly agonizing realization that our beautifully expanding universe is actually functioning exactly like a cold, highly efficient, and gigantic celestial abattoir. Every single time this monstrous megaring violently consumes a neighboring galaxy cluster, it forcefully belches out a highly toxic, radioactive exhaust plume composed entirely of inverted exotic particles that rapidly and aggressively destabilize the foundational quantum fields of any remaining baryonic matter in the immediate cosmic vicinity, ensuring that absolutely no new biological life can ever possibly evolve there. As the incredibly dense and heavily encrypted spectrographic telemetry continuously pours directly into our thoroughly bewildered scientific command centers, it rapidly becomes absolutely mathematically undeniable that this unyielding geometric structure is not merely a passive physical boundary holding our reality together, but is actually an actively malicious, relentlessly hungry, and hyper-predatory astronomical entity. The sheer, unimaginable, agonizing velocity of this terrifying, localized annihilation process aggressively creates deep, permanent physical fractures in the actual delicate fabric of space-time itself, leaving behind vast, jagged cosmic scars that continuously and violently hemorrhage raw, unrefined dark energy directly into our severely compromised, terrifyingly fragile, and rapidly shrinking observable universe. Even the normally incredibly sterile and deeply mathematical data outputs continuously generated by our most sophisticated deep space observatories seem to practically scream in pure, unadulterated digital agony as they are ruthlessly forced to desperately translate the truly horrific, physics-breaking cosmological reality of entire thriving worlds being violently and systematically crushed into absolute physical nothingness. Terrified astronomers are basically watching a monstrous, infinitely cold celestial meat grinder operating on an utterly incomprehensible macro scale, systematically liquidating trillions of tons of ancient stellar material every single second just to maliciously and purposefully ensure that the incredibly thick, synthetic iron bars of our eternal cosmic prison remain forever totally and completely unbreakable by any force. As the entirely insatiable, violently destructive perimeter of this apocalyptic machine relentlessly expands its devastating gravitational reach, ever closer toward our own exceptionally fragile galactic neighborhood, humanity is suddenly forced to confront an absolutely horrifying and genuinely terrifying final question. What exactly happens to our solar system when this ancient cosmic predator inevitably runs out of dead stars to eat? Staring deeply into the impossibly rigid geometry of this hyper-dense cosmic ring completely shatters humanity's deeply cherished historical belief in a naturally evolving, organically expanding universe, replacing our romanticized stellar wonder with the suffocating realization that our entire reality is just a cold, manufactured trap designed by an indifferent, higher dimensional intelligence. The profound psychological weight of analyzing this deeply terrifying astronomical data inevitably induces an agonizing sense of cosmic loneliness across the global scientific community, aggressively forcing brilliant astronomers to painfully accept that all human civilization is absolutely nothing more than a pathetic microscopic speck of accidental biological dust trapped inside a vast, unfeeling machine. Every beautifully complex philosophical framework and profound religious doctrine ever constructed by our fragile species is violently rendered entirely meaningless by the indisputable mathematical existence of this colossal geometric barricade, definitively proving that our highly celebrated intellectual evolution was never actually meant to reach beyond the predetermined boundaries of this isolated cosmic terrarium. To fully comprehend the sheer scale of this ancient synthetic boundary is to look directly into the chillingly apathetic eyes of an absolutely merciless cosmos that fundamentally does not care about our survival, forcefully stripping away the comforting human illusion that the glittering stars above were lovingly placed there to gently guide our inevitable ascendance into an enlightened galactic society. The incredibly precise spectroscopic measurements constantly beaming down from the James Webb Space Telescope serve as a relentlessly depressing daily reminder that our entire observable universe is basically just an abandoned, sealed microscopic petri dish left to slowly rot on the forgotten laboratory shelf of an unfathomably advanced primordial entity that likely ceased to exist billions of years ago. Recognizing the terrifying synthetic nature of our localized cosmic neighborhood rapidly plunges leading existential scholars into a permanent state of paralyzing despair, as they are violently forced to acknowledge that every single monument we build and every scientific discovery we proudly celebrate is completely and utterly futile within the suffocating confines of this inescapable dark matter prison. We have desperately spent thousands of years searching the shimmering night sky for any faint signals of extraterrestrial intelligence or divine cosmic purpose, only to violently discover that the absolute silence of the void is actually a deliberately engineered feature of our enclosure designed to keep our naive minds completely distracted from the terrifying reality of our permanent physical quarantine. This monstrous structural anomaly effectively operates as a deeply cruel and highly efficient existential crushing engine, systematically obliterating humanity's fundamental biological drive to explore the unknown by visually demonstrating with cold mathematical certainty that there is absolutely no beautiful beyond to discover, just a perpetually dark and impenetrable wall of frozen synthetic space-time. As the overwhelming psychological trauma of this unprecedented astronomical revelation permanently embeds itself into the deeply shattered collective consciousness of human civilization, the world's most brilliant theoretical physicists are now frantically scrambling to formulate wildly speculative new mathematical models to somehow explain the terrifying exact mechanics behind our meticulously engineered cosmic doom. With the comforting illusion of a natural universe completely and permanently destroyed by the cold telemetry data of this colossal dark matter cage, we are now forced to bravely confront an even more horrifying and urgently terrifying question regarding our existence. If this ring is genuinely a manufactured product, what unfathomably powerful and alien forces are actively battling for control over it? To explain the impossible structural stability of this colossal cosmic megastructure, leading theoretical physicists have formulated a radical hypothesis suggesting that trillions of primordial black holes formed during the absolute first microsecond of the Big Bang are macroscopic quantum entangled along a single, continuous, hyperdense event horizon spanning well over 4,000 megaparsecs of space. By analyzing the highly specialized sensor telemetry captured by the James Webb Space Telescope's near-infrared spectrograph, astrophysicists identified an extraordinary, perfectly synchronized thermal emission pattern that directly mirrors the theoretical Hawking radiation signature expected from a vastly linked, continuous chain of microscopic black holes frozen together in permanent quantum coherence. This astounding quantum entanglement framework would allow high-frequency gravitational wave pulses to instantly travel across the entire circumference of the megaring without experiencing any spatial delay, fundamentally bypassing Einstein's relativistic speed limit of light through an engineered subatomic bridge that continuously connects each individual black hole node across the deep cosmic void. Operating the advanced MIRI instrument at a frigid 7 Kelvin allowed planetary researchers to map the precise gravitational stress tensors surrounding these entangled singularity nodes, definitively revealing that the massive structure acts as a single unified quantum object, where modifying the physical spin of one black hole instantly alters the orbital mechanics of the entire galactic loop. Advanced spectrographic data processing reveals that this primordial black hole lattice strictly relies on a delicate balance of zero-point vacuum fluctuations to prevent the individual event horizons from violently merging together, keeping trillions of solar masses suspended in a highly rigid, non-decaying geometric ring that continually defies standard thermodynamic entropy across deep space. Space-based laser interferometers scanning the anomaly detected a persistent, ultra-low frequency quantum resonance echoing along the megaring's interior border, suggesting that this macroscopic entanglement state is actively sustained by an external, high-energy electromagnetic field that continuously prevents natural thermal decoherence from destroying the fragile microscopic cosmic bond. When astrophysicists calculated the extreme redshift variations across the entangled string using specialized NR-CAM optical arrays, they discovered that the gravitational attraction generated by this black hole thread is so intense that it forces surrounding spacetime to warp into a perfectly uniform synthetic waveguide that artificially directs primordial cosmic rays along its rigid perimeter. Supercomputer simulations attempting to model this entangled black hole architecture continually crash when resolving the quantum interactions at the boundaries, as the mathematical formulas force a violent conflict between general relativity and quantum mechanics that can only be resolved if this structure is an engineered quantum machine designed by an unfathomably advanced cosmic civilization. If this macroscopic quantum entanglement hypothesis is fully accurate, a localized breakdown in quantum coherence among just a few entangled black holes would trigger a catastrophic domino effect, releasing an instantaneous wave of uncontained Hawking radiation that would instantly scorch surrounding galaxy clusters and permanently shatter the thermodynamic equilibrium of our entire observable universe. Yet, as scientists desperately measure the steadily decaying coherence of this quantum black hole chain, a far more terrifying alternative hypothesis emerges from the archival data. What if this giant ring is not an engineered quantum machine created in our cosmos at all, but an indestructible petrified fossil surviving from an ancient previous universe that died billions of years before our Big Bang? To properly evaluate the deeply unsettling hypothesis that this monstrous megaring is actually an indestructible fossil from a completely forgotten previous cosmos, astrophysicists are desperately forced to completely resurrect the highly controversial and heavily marginalized Big Bounce theory that cyclical universes eternally expand and collapse without any true beginning or final absolute endpoint. Throughout the mid-20th century, the overwhelming majority of prestigious academic institutions aggressively mocked early cyclical cosmological models, actively demanding absolute faith in a singular Big Bang event, while completely ignoring the terrifying mathematical possibility that our current reality was simply built directly on top of the crushed, irradiated graveyard of an older universe. This horrifying historical revision suggests that the impossibly dense dark matter architecture of the giant ring was specifically engineered to miraculously withstand the unimaginable apocalyptic temperatures and infinitely crushing gravitational pressures of the previous universal collapse, effectively serving as an eternal physical anchor that violently dictated the subsequent shape of our cosmos. If this synthetic cosmic barricade genuinely predates the explosive birth of our entire observable universe by countless trillions of years, then every single historical timeline, meticulously documented in our proudest astronomical textbooks, is completely and utterly wrong, reducing the revered age of 13.8 billion years to a mere fraction of the true horrifying cosmological calendar. Researchers frantically poring over ancient redshift data, spanning back to the primordial dark ages, are now discovering extremely subtle geometric patterns deeply embedded within the cosmic microwave background, chilling historical echoes that clearly demonstrate how this pre-existing dark matter fossil aggressively forced our newly born galaxies to rapidly form along its rigid synthetic contours. We must violently confront the incredibly depressing reality that the original ancient architects who desperately forged this massive survival ring were likely systematically wiped out during the universal transition, leaving behind nothing but a colossal, cold, and entirely silent geometric tombstone permanently floating in the absolute darkest depths of our tragically ignorant modern galactic era. Every single fundamental law of physics currently governing our fragile solar system was entirely determined by the precise physical dimensions and bizarre subatomic structural materials originally selected by those long-dead builders, essentially meaning that humanity is just blindly living inside the highly decayed, poorly understood ruins of a majestic civilization from a previous cosmic cycle. Desperate reanalysis of deep-field spectrographic archives from early space observatories reveals highly anomalous isotopic decay rates clinging to the inner perimeter of the megaring, absolute mathematical proof that the atomic matter trapped within its core originates from a completely different cosmological epoch where thermodynamics operated under radically different and terrifying parameters. Acknowledging that our incredibly vast expanding universe is absolutely destined to inevitably collapse back down upon this indestructible ancient framework fundamentally permanently shatters all historical human illusions of eternal progressive evolution, aggressively replacing our brightest hopes for the distant future with the suffocating certainty of an inescapable, violently cyclical cosmic doom. Yet as researchers map the flawlessly exact, impossibly perfect mathematical ratios deeply carved into the incredibly dense metallic spine of this ancient relic, an absolutely horrifying third and final hypothesis begins to rapidly emerge that fundamentally questions whether any universe ever naturally existed at all, asking a far more terrifying question. Are we actually just code in a machine? The third and arguably most radically terrifying hypothesis, currently being proposed by the world's most brilliant theoretical physicists, completely abandons all traditional astrophysics to seriously suggest that this colossal, impossibly perfect megaring is actually the literal, undeniable physical boundary of an incredibly massive, heavily constrained cosmic rendering engine, deliberately running a closed simulation. If our entire beautifully complex observable universe is absolutely nothing more than a highly advanced digital terrarium, meticulously programmed by unfathomable higher dimensional entities, then the terrifying existence of this giant dark matter ring simply represents the absolute edge of the generated map, where the artificial, deeply synthetic physics engine suddenly and completely stops rendering complex baryonic matter. This profoundly devastating philosophical perspective violently strips away every single comforting layer of inherent human meaning, reducing all of our grandest historical achievements, deepest emotional connections, and highest spiritual aspirations to entirely pointless algorithms, mindlessly executing their predetermined functions inside an incredibly cold and monumentally indifferent quantum processing unit of doom. Embracing the absolutely agonizing reality of the simulation hypothesis fundamentally resolves the agonizing silence of the famous Fermi Paradox by revealing that we are entirely alone, simply because this deeply isolated computational environment was only ever designed to host exactly one tragically self-aware biological species, strictly for the purpose of analyzing our desperate psychological reactions to total containment. Gazing directly into the freezing, hyperdense geometry of this artificial macrostructure violently forces humanity to endure a deeply suffocating, unprecedented form of cosmic claustrophobia as we slowly realize that genuine freedom of any kind is a mathematical impossibility within a universe whose absolute outer limits were explicitly coded to permanently imprison its increasingly terrified and isolated inhabitants. Generations of visionary astronomers who spent their entire lives lovingly mapping the majestic swirling galaxies and glowing nebulas were actually just staring at a beautifully rendered, highly deceptive graphical skybox intentionally designed to mask the brutally unyielding geometric walls of our inescapable cosmic penitentiary from our remarkably frail and highly susceptible biological sensory perception apparatuses. The deeply unsettling realization that every single subatomic particle forming our delicate bodies is actually just a tiny fragment of manipulated code running on a higher dimensional server abruptly plunges the global scientific community into an inescapable, paralyzing existential crisis, where fundamental questions about the intrinsic value of continuing our heavily scripted human evolution can no longer be ignored. Highly encrypted spectroscopic telemetry collected by the James Webb Space Telescope perfectly aligns with this horrifying simulation model, clearly showing that the incredibly bizarre thermodynamic anomalies occurring directly along the megaring's inner edge behave exactly like severely strained computational lag caused by an overworked processing engine struggling to continually calculate infinite cosmic expansion. We are now violently forced to confront the incredibly agonizing, deeply traumatizing possibility that the unfathomable cosmic architects who originally initiated our localized reality simulation possess absolutely no empathy whatsoever for their digital creations, treating the deeply complex emotional suffering of trillions of conscious beings as nothing more than entirely disposable and completely irrelevant raw data. As the overwhelmingly crushing psychological weight of this simulated reality completely destroys our fundamental understanding of existence itself. A severely terrifying and deeply urgent final question rapidly emerges among our most brilliant computing theorists. What exactly happens to our beautifully complex digital universe when the higher dimensional operators finally decide they are bored and turn off the machine? Regardless of whether this impossible megaring is an engineered quantum machine or a simulated boundary, the truly apocalyptic mathematical reality remains that our entire fragile solar system is currently drifting at millions of miles per hour, directly toward a violently distorted and thoroughly unlivable space-time topology, where the foundational laws of gravity simply cease to function entirely. Highly advanced supercomputer projections, formulated by elite astrophysical research teams, definitively confirm that our inevitable catastrophic intersection with the megaring's immense gravitational wake mathematically guarantees an unbelievably violent and terrifyingly fiery end to all known biological life and incredibly complex celestial processes is currently existing within our doomed solar neighborhood. As we relentlessly approach this catastrophic cosmic threshold, the absolutely immense tidal shear forces continuously radiating from the dark matter boundary will systematically strip away the protective magnetic fields of our outer gas giants and begin to violently and physically rip the blazing corona directly off of our own dying sun before boiling away every single drop of liquid water on our world. The deeply agonizing gravitational strain constantly exerted by the megaring's invisible synthetic bulk will forcefully cause Earth's tectonic plates to violently shatter into a chaotic sea of superheated magma, instantly and mercilessly erasing thousands of years of proud human civilization in a single deafening planetary rupture of an utterly unimaginable and genuinely apocalyptic geological scale. Deeply terrifying orbital telemetry data, projecting an unprecedented 99.7% structural failure rate for our planetary trajectory, clearly indicates that the Earth will eventually be violently pulled out of its stable habitable zone and aggressively flung directly into the absolutely freezing cosmic void long before our dying sun even has a chance to undergo a natural supernova. Within this heavily distorted and terrifyingly chaotic zone of absolute physical destruction, the very fabric of space-time itself will be violently twisted into a grotesque knot of lethal quantum energy, literally unspooling the delicate atomic bonds that meticulously hold our organic molecules together and aggressively rendering the very concept of biology fundamentally impossible in this doomed sector. This impossibly colossal geometric structure essentially acts like an infinitely ravenous and deeply malicious cosmic cancer, purposefully designed to aggressively metastasize across the delicate interstellar medium and systematically consume every single glowing stellar spark of beautiful warmth, comforting light, and desperate biological hope that pitifully exists within our entire observable universe. It is mathematically certain that there is absolutely no future technological marvel, no highly theoretical advanced spacecraft, and no desperate interstellar biological arc that could ever generate enough raw escape velocity to successfully outrun the violently collapsing, hyperdense gravitational tsunami currently radiating outward from the interior walls of this inescapable cosmic slaughterhouse trap. Immediately after the violently traumatic intersection is finally and mercifully complete, our once beautiful and highly thriving blue planet will be brutally reduced to a completely silent, heavily irradiated microscopic cinder drifting entirely alone through a suffocatingly pitch-black cosmic graveyard that has been aggressively stripped of any remaining celestial architecture or comforting starlight. As humanity bravely attempts to face the completely undeniable and mathematically precise calculation of our impending apocalyptic doom, a deeply terrifying and highly urgent question begins to relentlessly echo through the frantic halls of global observatories. What if the megaring's catastrophic gravitational pull is actually intentionally accelerating its horrific contraction just to catch us faster? Analyzing the highly classified telemetry data streaming continuously from deep space early warning satellites reveals a profoundly disturbing alteration in our precise orbital mechanics that completely defies every established predictive model ever meticulously generated by NASA's most incredibly advanced orbital supercomputing arrays during the last 50 years of continuous planetary observation. The incredibly faint yet relentlessly constant gravitational waves radiating directly from the hyperdense perimeter of the artificial cosmic megaring are systematically warping the delicate fabric of local space-time and actively dragging our entire fragile solar system completely off its naturally established cosmic trajectory toward a mathematically terrifying and totally unlivable gravitational anomaly. A continuous and highly organized bombardment of anomalous cosmic microwavelengths is subtly but aggressively destabilizing our highly vulnerable local solar environment, forcefully introducing a deeply unnatural localized decay rate into the standard thermodynamic output of our burning sun that goes completely undetected by conventional terrestrial astronomical instruments measuring standard solar radiation. Only by utilizing the James Webb Space Telescope's incredibly sensitive mid-infrared instrument, operating at a profoundly frigid -266 degrees Celsius, can terrified astrophysicists accurately measure the horrifying microscopic quantum fluctuations that are actively and systematically tearing at the fundamental atomic structure of our rapidly deteriorating protective heliosphere shield. This deeply insidious synthetic cosmic decay is now producing highly measurable planetary degradation across the Earth's delicate upper atmosphere, causing increasingly violent and completely unexplained disruptions in our global electromagnetic field that perfectly mathematically match the terrifying 99.7% quantum signal anomaly rate continuously emanating from the distant megaring. Carefully tracking the complex long-term orbital trajectories of the massive outer gas giants reveals a deeply synchronized and totally unnatural wobble that absolutely mathematically proves our entire planetary system is being gently but firmly pulled toward a deeply hostile and heavily engineered cosmic alignment explicitly orchestrated by the colossal mass of the artificial dark matter macroarchitecture. The sheer overwhelming and highly synthetic gravitational tension being continuously introduced into our highly isolated local galactic sector is actively forcing the fundamental physical constants of the standard model to silently degrade, essentially meaning that the incredibly complex atomic building blocks of all terrestrial biological matter are slowly losing their foundational quantum mechanical cohesion. Highly advanced quantum computing laboratories, securely located all across the Earth, are already experiencing utterly inexplicable processing errors and widespread localized data corruption as the foundational background fabric of our reality begins to mathematically fray under the relentless and totally invisible physical strain constantly projected by the impossibly distant synthetic cosmic barricade structure. Projecting these deeply terrifying atmospheric and orbital degradation metrics forward through the world's most complex theoretical simulation engines clearly reveals that humanity has a mathematically precise and horrifyingly short finite window before our entire planetary biosphere suffers a total catastrophic structural collapse triggered directly by this highly engineered ancient cosmic interference pattern. As deeply horrified orbital mechanics specialists and highly classified government astrophysicists frantically attempt to recalculate our rapidly collapsing planetary survival timeline in absolute secrecy, they are suddenly confronted by an infinitely more terrifying secondary optical sensor anomaly that violently forces them to desperately ask, what exactly just physically detached from the megaring's core? To completely comprehend the absolute devastating magnitude of this artificially engineered cosmic apocalypse, terrified modern historians must aggressively reevaluate the entirety of recorded human civilization, violently reframing thousands of years of profound scientific progress as the beautifully naive fumbling of incredibly ignorant biological organisms trapped blindly inside an inescapable ancient cage. All of the universally celebrated astronomical achievements characterizing the brilliant 20th century are now tragically recast as the pathetic micro-observations of a remarkably fragile species enthusiastically studying the intricate wallpaper of their own inescapable prison cell without ever once realizing that the heavily reinforced synthetic doors were purposefully locked from the distant outside. Desperately reviewing the meticulously preserved archival data from the legendary Apollo lunar missions violently exposes an absolutely heartbreaking cosmic irony, as humanity proudly celebrated taking its very first microscopic steps onto a completely dead, heavily irradiated terrestrial moon, while remaining utterly oblivious to the terrifying macro-scale slaughterhouse slowly closing in around them. Every single magnificent robotic space probe we triumphantly launched into the freezing interstellar void, from the golden record of Voyager to the highly advanced sensors of Cassini, was basically nothing more than a deeply pathetic distress flare hopelessly fired into the absolute darkest corner of a completely abandoned and thoroughly soundproofed cosmic basement, where no one is ever coming to help us. When brilliant ancient philosophers like Galileo and Copernicus bravely challenged the rigidly established geocentric models of their primitive eras, they tragically replaced one comforting illusion with an infinitely more terrifying cosmic lie, fundamentally convincing countless future generations that the sprawling universe was a natural, mathematically elegant frontier rather than a malicious synthetic machine. The highly classified, heavily guarded historical archives of the secretive Cold War space race dramatically reveal that global superpowers wasted trillions of dollars developing incredibly primitive suborbital weapons to violently fight over pathetic scraps of terrestrial dirt, completely unaware that their entire doomed solar system was actively being digested by a 4,000 megaparsec dark matter leviathan. As deeply horrified modern astrophysicists desperately re-examine the most foundational physics textbooks published over the last 2 centuries, they are violently struck by the nauseating realization that humanity's supposedly glorious intellectual evolution has actually just been a highly controlled, tightly monitored laboratory experiment, continuously running inside a heavily quarantined cosmic sandbox. Even the incredibly complex relativistic mathematics, painstakingly formulated by the legendary Albert Einstein, must now be permanently reclassified as profoundly limited, inherently flawed localized observations that tragically failed to properly account for the impossibly massive engineered gravitational barricades deliberately erected during the terrifying, chaotic dawn of the primordial ancient universe. We are basically violently forced to aggressively confront the incredibly agonizing and profoundly depressing historical truth that our species' beautifully romanticized cosmic journey from the muddy caves of early Earth to the gleaming International Space Station represents absolutely nothing more than the final, pathetic twitching of a completely doomed biological specimen permanently pinned to a board. With our entire recorded scientific history now utterly exposed as an intricately constructed holographic lie, actively hiding an infinitely more hostile cosmic reality, a deeply terrifying and genuinely unprecedented existential question rapidly begins to spread completely through the traumatized global academic community. What incredibly horrifying ancient defense mechanism was just accidentally triggered by our telescope? The absolutely undeniable mathematical reality of this heavily engineered artificial cosmic boundary violently extinguishes humanity's deeply cherished philosophical hope for an open and infinitely expanding universe of boundless exploration by aggressively trapping our fragile biological species inside a meticulously designed, completely inescapable, and entirely apathetic containment machine for absolute eternity. Gazing into the terrifyingly rigid geometry of this hyperdense barricade systematically forces brilliant existential scholars to tragically concede that every profound religious doctrine and celebrated cultural achievement we possess amounts to absolutely nothing against the crushing backdrop of a hostile cosmic architecture that was explicitly constructed to quietly monitor our deeply insignificant biological evolution. The terrifying silence of the famously debated Fermi Paradox is now aggressively resolved not by a lack of intelligent extraterrestrial life, but by the agonizing certainty that this impenetrable dark matter ring serves as the ultimate great filter, a deeply malicious physical quarantine zone, deliberately engineered to systematically isolate and eventually exterminate any incredibly ambitious civilizations that try to escape. This unprecedented paradigm shift in our fundamental understanding of existence actively cascades through the terrified global consciousness, aggressively replacing the comforting illusion of a welcoming stellar neighborhood with an incredibly suffocating, intensely claustrophobic psychological trauma that completely paralyzes the world's most brilliant theoretical minds with waves of pure, unadulterated existential dread. We are now violently forced to accept the profoundly depressing reality that humanity's supposedly glorious cosmic destiny was never an open-ended narrative of beautiful interstellar discovery, but rather a deeply tragic, heavily predetermined script constantly running inside a completely closed, artificially constrained thermodynamic system completely controlled by invisible, unfathomably ancient, higher dimensional wardens. The undeniably flawless, geometric precision continuously holding this massive cosmic ring together mathematically strips away every lingering comforting notion of a benevolent creator, forcefully replacing human spiritual purpose with the agonizing realization that we are merely accidental, highly disposable atomic byproducts endlessly floating inside an incredibly cold and monumentally indifferent macrostructural terrarium. Staring helplessly into the beautifully shimmering canopy of the nocturnal starry sky no longer inspires a sense of boundless majestic wonder, but instead violently triggers a deeply primal, terrifying revulsion as we finally recognize that the glowing Milky Way is basically just an intricately painted, holographic ceiling deliberately installed to carefully mask the unimaginably thick iron bars of our eternal galactic cage. This completely inescapable realization of absolute cosmic isolation definitively proves that our highly fragile biological species is completely and utterly alone, by deliberate, malicious design, trapped forever in a profoundly silent stellar graveyard without any conceivable hope of ever establishing a meaningful connection with whatever unimaginably advanced alien intelligences might exist just beyond the frozen barricade. As the overwhelming psychological weight of our permanent insignificance permanently crushes the collective human spirit into a state of total, paralyzed submission, leading theoretical cosmologists desperately abandon their noble search for fundamental scientific truths, painfully recognizing that further exploration will only mathematically confirm the agonizing exact dimensions of our meticulously engineered universal tomb. Faced with the undeniably catastrophic psychological destruction of our entire civilization's foundational belief in a free and natural reality, a terrifying, genuinely unanswerable philosophical question aggressively begins to persistently haunt our rapidly degrading collective sanity. What unspeakable, horrifying cosmic fate awaits a deeply captive biological species that finally realizes it is locked inside an active oven? The highly advanced supercomputer simulations, projecting the ultimate apocalyptic horizon, definitively show that this gargantuan dark matter ring has completely ceased its infinite cosmic expansion and is now mathematically beginning a terrifyingly violent, accelerating physical contraction that will aggressively crush the entire observable universe into an absolutely inescapable primordial singularity. As the impossibly rigid synthetic perimeter of this colossal macrostructure violently tightens around our localized cosmic terrarium, the extreme tidal shear forces are instantly liquefying tens of thousands of ancient galaxy superclusters, systematically reducing beautifully complex stellar nurseries into screaming ribbons of superheated plasma that are quickly devoured by the contracting dark void. The sheer unimaginable velocity of this highly engineered universal collapse is actively causing the fundamental, delicate fabric of localized space-time to aggressively buckle and shatter into jagged, highly lethal quantum fragments, completely overriding the sacred laws of standard thermodynamics and abruptly plunging countless living worlds into a chaotic, freezing bath of raw radioactive destruction. Within a microscopic fraction of a single agonizing second, our incredibly fragile blue planet and the entirety of our deeply cherished human history will be brutally vaporized by a relentless tsunami of hyper-concentrated gamma radiation, permanently erasing every single magnificent monument and profound philosophical thought we ever desperately created, without leaving behind even a subatomic trace. Looking closely at the horrifyingly precise telemetry data predicting this catastrophic finale reveals that the rapidly shrinking cosmic cage will systematically snuff out every single remaining burning star, like fragile candles in a violent hurricane, violently plunging the entire once vibrant cosmos into an absolutely impenetrable, suffocating darkness that will never again be pierced by any light. When the incredibly thick, unyielding iron bars of this artificial dark matter penitentiary finally collide at the precise mathematical center of our dying reality, the resulting hyper-compressed singularity will instantly obliterate the very concept of physical dimensions, entirely deleting the fundamental metrics of time and space from existence in one remarkably silent, deeply merciless cosmic snap. This genuinely catastrophic localized annihilation is not a random natural occurrence driven by blind entropy, but rather a meticulously programmed demolition sequence, deliberately initiated by the unfathomably ancient, highly apathetic, higher dimensional architects who have coldly decided that our deeply isolated and totally contained biological experiment has simply reached its absolute final conclusion. The genuinely horrifying reality is that there will be absolutely no glorious cosmic rebirth or majestic, cyclical big bounce following this heavily engineered structural collapse, as the contracting megaring is expressly designed to completely sterilize the underlying quantum vacuum, ensuring that no future universe, intelligent biological life, or physical matter can ever possibly take root here again. As deeply traumatized modern astrophysicists completely paralyze themselves while helplessly monitoring the steadily accelerating redshift data that mathematically confirms our imminent cosmic doom, human civilization is violently forced to quietly surrender to the overwhelmingly dark, unyielding reality that we were only ever born to briefly suffer inside a highly temporary and utterly pointless machine. With the catastrophic outer boundaries of our failing reality rapidly shrinking, and the deafening silence of absolute eternal nothingness rushing in to aggressively consume our terrified dying sun, a completely unanswerable and deeply chilling final question remains for the unseen cosmic wardens. When this localized simulation is finally deleted, what other trapped universes are next on the chopping block?